everyone. I'm Dr. Tait. I'm here to do Tuesday Spark. Welcome. I hope that you've had a good day. And if you're tuning in, just go down to the bottom of your page and give me some thumbs up or some hearts. And also invite some people to come on. You just go down to the bottom of your page and invite them to come on. And the other thing is, get in a place where you can just relax. Listen, Tuesday Spark is about words of information, words of inspiration, and words of insight. Maybe something I say that may spark something in your mind. Listen, I'm not trying to tell you what to think. I'm just trying to get you to think. So let's spark it up for a minute. Look, this is part 3 of Black is Beautiful. But this subtitle is Hip Hop's Influence on Fashion. So it's part 3. Hip hop has had a tremendous impact on all of us if you listen to the music. And of course, what we hear today is a far cry from how hip hop started back in the 70s. Black is absolutely beautiful. Hip hop culture has had sort of the biggest influence on fashion and trends, labeled street culture, if you will, informing plenty of style and trends and clothing brands that rose to prominence, particularly between the 70s and probably early 90s. In just these few decades, it evolved from the fringes of what is called a subculture to the most prominent and dominant force in pop culture. So in the 1970s in New York, hip hop was born as a creation to disco music, a sort of reaction to it rather. And Caribbean immigrants and African American youth in disenfranchised neighborhoods began, like in the Bronx and other places, began coming together for impromptu, what they call block parties in the boroughs. And early pioneers like DJ Cool, Herc, and Grand Wizard Theodore and Grandmaster Flash started the practice of using 2 turntables to extend the dance break in funk and soul records and creating a sort of seamless sound, a loop ideal for dancing endlessly. It's almost like go-go here in Washington, D.C. Chuck Brown, where the music just never stopped. It went from one sort of song to the next and just seamlessly, and you just kept going. Well, the breakbeat formed the backbone of hip-hop music and later led to the practice of sampling. That means you take something from existing music to create something new, adding different tracks and instruments to transform the original piece into a brand new song. So this rhythmic delivery of sort of rapping came from the practice of capping, where 2 men would compete. And of course, women got involved in it too, and words over a microphone to win over an audience. And the term MC came from the traditional acronym MC, short for Master of Ceremonies. And before rappers, the MC's role was to hype up the audience between the DJ songs and encourage them to dance. Early hip hop culture was comprised of 4 elements: rapping, DJing or DJing, and then graffiti writing and break dancing, and athletically challenging dance form that started developing in the 80s. And when you think about break dance, we don't see too much of that today, but you go back and look at some old tapes and you'll see it. And then they would do all kinds of stuff, windmills and flares, and it was a way of just getting the body involved in these precise movements. And so you had these hip hop girls and these hip hop boys who wore Adidas tracksuits and straight leg denim over a pair of suede Pumas, and Adidas Superstars and customized sort of flat laces. They wear their Kangol bucket hats and gazelle sunglasses and were commonplace. And in the winter especially, it was a time to, when it got cold, they would whip out these sort of shearling coats, which was made of sort of goat skin and lamb's wool, or leather jackets because it was cold. Then they wore jewelry, they wore chains, and became a prominent sort of fixture around their necks and their peers. And they embodied this kind of style, people like Slick Rick. But while, the punk rock movement sort of was different, they kind of bucked the system. They was anti-fashion, and they stood in contrast to consumption and capitalism. But hip hop just fully embraced, consuming and taking in style and creating style, seeing dressing up as its own competition. Even the rappers would boast who was the best dressed. But ironically, you look at where some of this fashion that these hip hop artists, particularly in the early stages of hip hop, got it from? Well, they got it from them, unfortunately, and this may sound like a stereotype, but it's part of history. It got it from drug dealers. They're the ones who actually had the money and to buy this high-end gear that most rappers lyrically bragged about, but a lot of them didn't have it. So a great portion of hip-hop uniform is informed by these drug dealers, these drug entrepreneurs, and what they wore. In the age before streetwear boutiques, you had sportswear stores, old school outfitters that peddle sneakers and workwear products like Carhartt coats and chore coats and Timberland boots. See, these boots, they weren't just worn for fashion. They actually were worn by these guys standing on the corner dealing because they were out there in the New York cold. So they had a sort of utilitarian effect. I mean, in terms they had to wear these clothes because it was cold, but it became a part of fashion. So sportswear brands like Nike and Adidas were always important to the hip hop uniform. As hip hop evolved, so did the sneaker culture. You look at it today, I mean, you think about the multi-billion-dollar industry that the sneaker industry has become is mainly driven by the hip hop culture and of course sports, but hip hop culture was a main player. The first sense of today's barrage of rapper and sneaker brand collaborations happened in 1986 when Adidas signed Run DMC to a $1 million endorsement deal that included a signature line for the group. The story sort of goes something like this. The trio had released their third album called Raising Hell, and their manager at the time, Mr. Cohen, invited Adidas executive Angelo Anastasio to a show at the Madison Square Garden. And before performing their hit song, My Adidas, the group asked the audience to raise their shoes in the air and impressed with the amount of three-stripe kicks he saw in the building. Anastasio signed the group. So black is beautiful, you know. It's like it can be iconic. It could be a way also of funding other enterprises. Some of them are not our own, unfortunately, but even the West Coast wouldn't be left behind. You got to know that the West Coast, such as groups as Public Enemy and NWA, came forth with their own unique sound and sense of style. Baseball caps, coach jackets, and a more militaristic dress code similar to the Black Panther Party provided a contrast to the East Coast hip hop style. And as hip hop entered the 90s, sports teams and Afrocentric colors began to seep into the conversation, as well as early sort of streetwear labels like Stussy and Extra Large. Filmmaker Spike Lee immortalized sort of Air Jordan sneaker series in his films, often outfitting characters like Mars Blackman and Buggin' out in the crisp pair of Jordan kicks and oversized eyeglasses and African print shorts. Remember those commercials? And in the 90s and early 2000s were marked by a time of streetwear, urban brands born out of hip-hop culture, graffiti writers like Mark Echo and Stash and Calls turned t-shirts into a canvas of their work, and moguls like Russell Simmons and P. Diddy, what he was called Puff Daddy back then, decided to start their own clothing lines rather than to cowtail the designers outside the culture. This is how black is beautiful, how we take our own fashion and we create an industry for ourselves. We've done that, and then we turn around at times, and then we'll turn around and then sell our brand. Sometimes we have questions why, but that's some business decision. But we start these things, and like FUBU was founded by Damon John, and got LL Cool J to wear one of his hats and shout the brand out during a Gap commercial in the legendary moment of marketing inception. So it's just so very interesting how we as black people have informed and how we have influenced fashion and how we have been players and sometimes never really getting our just due. And we don't even need to look any further. I'm a big sports fan, how hip hop wasn't just about music, but the lifestyle and the attitude it represented. Look at the NBA and how it has evolved. The basketball league's stars sort of transitioned from Magic Johnson and Larry Bird to Michael Jordan and Allen Iverson. Jordan was a style icon in his own right. His Jordan brand of line of sneakers and apparel were a sort of shorthand status symbol on the streets, infamously inspiring a Sports Illustrated article about people being killed for his kicks. Now, Iverson was very interesting, one of my favorite players out of the Virginia area, and played for Georgetown. He was tattooed up. He was tatted, as they said, cornrow and all of that, baggy pants. But he was a star for the Philadelphia 76ers. And he drew some sort of negative press from then the league commissioner David Stern, as Allen Iverson would sit courtside and showed up at games with baggy, oversized sweatsuits and jeans and T-shirts and fitted baseball caps, as was part of the course of hip-hop trends. But he was his own person. And I think a lot of people would have saw him perhaps as an outsider too, but they embraced him because he had a uniqueness about his style, and he was going to be himself. So even in 2005, Stern, then he was the commissioner for the NBA. He implemented a mandatory dress code for the NBA, requiring all players to dress in business conservative attire when representing the NBA in any official capacity. Of course, most of them didn't do that. And you look at them today, from LeBron James, from Dwayne Wade, who's retired, and you look at Russell Westbrook, who now plays for the Wizards, in the style that they bring. Black is beautiful. Black fashion, hip-hop's influence didn't stop there. Didn't miss the church. Kurt Franklin and Lecrae, these guys and other people who, would wear different clothes and the way they would sing and even rap in their music. Because there was this thing, even my niece had me to understand about peacocking, where black folks would get dressed up on Sunday because that was the only day in slavery where the massa would let them dress up. And so today we've had those same patterns. Many of us, churches become a place, over British traditions. I would go to church and it's a time to dress. And even Easter, I had a person talk to me and say they want their kids to wear, little girl to wear a dress and when the son to be dressed up. And I told them, I said, well, our church is a little bit different. I said, you could come that way, but it's a little different. So I just want you to realize that fashion is important. Black is beautiful. And hip hop has had a tremendous impact on you and on me. Have a wonderful evening. I'm Dr. Tait.